Sorry, 1 second.
You can't see.
Sorry, I have allergies this morning, so make sure I have the tissue. Okay.
Good morning to members of the media. Thank you for joining us this morning. Before we begin, we will do Q&A at the end of the news conference after all our speakers will make their remarks. If you have a question, you can raise your hand and we will call on you, we'll unmute you, or you can write your question in the chat box and I will read it aloud. Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz.
Thank you so much. Good morning, and thanks to everyone for joining us. Over the weekend, most Americans, about 70% of us, marked our support for the 49th anniversary of the landmark Roe v. Wade decision. But tragically, that might be the last one that we celebrate. A small band of conservative extremists across the country and on the Supreme Court want to end the basic healthcare and reproductive rights women now possess, largely due to Roe. Now, I say small band of extremists because most people, conservatives and liberals alike, would rather reduce the need for abortions by expanding sex education and ensuring easy access to birth control. But that common sense path, preserving abortion rights while reducing the need for it, is not something the current Republican Party leaders embrace. In fact, they want the exact opposite: to end reproductive rights and restrict access to sex education and birth control options. It's this radical right-wing agenda that our mothers, daughters, sisters, and aunts must now confront. Access to abortion services is already too difficult to obtain today. But now we stare into a future where millions of women must confront additional discriminatory barriers to accessing reproductive care. They could face even more agonizing, ill-advised health decisions, or even handing control of how and when to have a family over to the government. It appears that an extremist right-wing Supreme Court majority is leaning toward allowing Mississippi's 15-week abortion ban to take effect and effectively overturn Roe. That same majority already refused to set aside the Texas 6-week abortion ban, despite it clearly being unconstitutional and utterly obliterating the concepts of judicial review and accountability. Let's face it, the days of legal and accessible abortion across the country may be numbered. By this summer, the Supreme Court could officially right to an abortion. Close to home, Florida lawmakers are racing toward an abortion ban of 15 weeks, complete. We must act, and we must act fast. For starters, we need to register new voters. We need to register new voters like never before. There must be electoral consequences for those who would strip women of our basic right to control our own bodies. If we elect Democrats to office from the State House to the White House, we can roll back and end these barbaric new laws. That includes Florida's 2 senators who refused to back the Women's Health Protection Act, which the House has already passed. This law would provide federal protection of our reproductive rights, even without Roe. We also need to vote with our feet. Taking to the streets moves wavering lawmakers and judges. And Florida politicians need to decide if they want to unleash the wrath of women across our country, those same women, by the way, who often decide where millions of families go on vacation. Now, I know most Republicans in Tallahassee care more about their next primary than they do about how abortion bans will affect their daughters, wives, or sisters. But what about Florida's economy? Do they care about that? Texas can afford to tell the rest of America that in the Lone Star State, women's rights won't be respected or protected. Florida cannot afford to send that same message. Our state thrives on women, moms, and families choosing Florida as a vacation destination time and time again. Yet with the proposed 15-week ban, Florida's conservative lawmakers are slapping those decision makers in the face, blatantly disrespecting their autonomy and dignity. And those potential high-tech and medical sector employers that we shower with state incentives, they won't want to come to a state where women employees must live episodes of Handmaid's Tale every day. The sad truth is we shouldn't have to make this argument. Financial incentives should not be the only way to get Republican attention when women's basic human rights are at stake. But we will not resign ourselves to losing our rights. We will fight like hell to hold on and expand them. And together, we can beat back those who would control our bodies and our lives. And now we'll hear from some of my Florida counterparts. First, I'd like to introduce my colleague and dear friend and a former state legislator himself, as well as statewide office holder, Congressman Charlie Crist. Congressman?
Thank you so much to my colleague and my dear friend, Congressman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, for holding this very important press conference to bring attention to those shameless attacks on a woman's right to choose in Florida and across our nation. It's no secret that Republican-led states are actively working to dismantle the protections guaranteed by both the Constitution and Roe, stripping away access to safe, affordable abortions. Just last week, in fact, Republicans in the Florida House brazenly moved forward with an unconstitutional bill that bans abortions after 15 weeks. Governor DeSantis and his fellow Republicans are turning their backs on the women of Florida, patient privacy, and the rule of law. Make no mistake about it. This is an attack on a woman's constitutionally protected right to privacy and her freedom of choice. Overturning Roe v. Wade would be an affront to every woman in America. It tells women that your government doesn't trust you, not with your body, not with making decisions for yourself and your family, and not with your own life and future. Let me be clear. Roe has been the law of the land, as Debbie just mentioned, for the past 49 years. I believe that a decision to have an abortion is between a woman and her doctor and her family, not the government. We will not stand for this assault on reproductive rights. We must fight against these senseless attacks on women. It's a woman's right to choose that's at stake. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you so much, Congressman Crist. Next, I'd like to introduce our newly minted South Florida member of the congressional delegation, Congresswoman Sheila Sherpalis McCormick.
Thank you so much for having me be here today. Right now, what we're facing are consistent attacks on women. We understand that women still have a lot of burdens we have to overcome when it comes to healthcare. But now when we're seeing that the rolling back of Roe versus Wade is more imperative for us to organize and fight like ever, because what the governor and what the concerted effort of the Republicans are in the country is to suppress the voice of women who believe in choosing their families and believe in choosing their pathway in life. And that's why it's more imperative now than ever that we actually organize, that we bring people to the polls, and we hold every legislator accountable who's trying to suppress our will and impose their own will. And so I think today is the beginning of a beautiful start where we organize and we make the call out to all women that we will go out and vote. We will register everyone to vote, and that we will actually vote them out if they're trying to suppress us and our right to choose our pathway in life, including our reproductive rights. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Next, I'd like to ask the Senate Democratic leader, who is in the midst of an intense legislative session and leading the way for all of our constituents. That's Senate Democratic leader Lauren Book.
Thank you, Congresswoman, and thank you so much for having us here. Florida's governor likes to tout us as the free state of Florida, except when it comes to a woman's freedom to choose what's right for herself, her body, her family, or their future. Over the last several years, Florida Republicans have chipped away at a woman's right to freedom and their right to choose, forcing children to have children, defiling the sanctity of Florida law with political rhetoric like preborn or born alive. Now we're facing yet another effort to trample women's freedoms and rights by limiting safe and legal abortion care to a 15-week window without a carve-out for rape or incest. This is nothing more than a thinly veiled attempt at controlling women's choices, our voices, and our lives, with no, again, exemption for rape, incest, or human trafficking. As a survivor of sexual assault, and simply as a human being, I am appalled, disgusted, the very consideration of all of these measures as cruel and unusual punishments. At its core, abortion regulation is a core mechanism, a control mechanism, and an affront to every woman's individual freedom and independence. These continued efforts are all out, as we've talked about, an assault on women's rights. It's happened in Texas, it's happened in Georgia, Ohio, Kentucky, Mississippi, Texas, Louisiana, and now it's happening in Florida. And we know it's going to continue to happen in every single state across the country if women and their legislators don't stand up, speak out, and vote for pro-choice candidates in our upcoming election cycle. 1 in every 4 women will have an abortion for any number of reasons in their lifetime. Restricting or outlawing that individual choice will not stop that. but it will stop access to safe and legal procedures, endangering women's lives in the process. It will make that access especially difficult for women who cannot afford to travel out of state or face childcare or immigration issues. So long as the bodily autonomy of self-determination of women are under attack, I vow that not only I, but our Senate Democrats will give those who seek to oppress reproductive rights the fight of their lives. For my daughter, for myself, for fellow survivors of child sexual assault, and for women everywhere. They simply cannot win.
Thank you so much, Leader Book. Appreciate your remarks. Next, I'd like to introduce my dear friend, State Representative Robin Bartleman.
Thank you, Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz. And you know what I'm about to say because you actually lived through this with me. I am a woman who never thought in a million years that I would have to make a decision about having an abortion. None of us do. But when I was told that my fetus had abnormalities, my husband at the time and I were faced with serious decisions. We went back and forth. We had legal pads of pro and con. I went back and forth to all of my friends, crying every single day. And I needed that time. And I needed that autonomy to make that decision as to whether or not I wanted to terminate that pregnancy. This statute that's being brought through the Florida House takes away every woman's ability to have the personal freedom to make decisions about his or her body and their family. That decision was between me, my husband, my doctor, and my God. No one else belonged in that room, no one else. And politicians want to find their way into your homes and into your doctor offices and exam rooms and tell you what you can do with your body. Governor Ron DeSantis likes to say that Florida is the freest state. Well, women need to have the freedom to make decisions about their body and their families. And I am appalled that we are debating this and that there's an arbitrary 15-week ban. We should do nothing. Roe versus Wade has been in law for 49 years. It needs to remain that way. And women like me need to have the ability to make the decisions on their own without any interference from the government. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative Bartleman. I remember living through that with you like it was yesterday. And it's something that I want no woman to ever have to go through, and certainly not to have those choices taken away from them. Thank you. Next is our dear friend, Representative Felicia Robinson.
Thank you, Congresswoman. 2 days after the 49th anniversary of Roe versus Wade, my heart is saddened and I cannot seem to wrap my mind around why we are having this conversation in 2022. The historic Supreme Court ruling of Roe versus Wade decision on abortion rights remain under attack by Republicans both here in Florida and across the nation. Let's not be deceived about abortion, because abortion is common. As it was stated earlier, 1 in 4 women who are able to get pregnant will have an abortion at some point. Abortion is essential health care, a constitutional right, and a human right. A woman's decision about her own health care should be made between her and her doctor and her family. The decision of if, when, and how to have a child is deeply personal. A woman and her family must make the decision that is right for them. Politicians should not interfere. People have personal and religious beliefs about abortion. And from my upbringing, God always gives you choice. He doesn't force you to do anything. I'm not asking for anyone to change their beliefs. This is not about a person's belief. This is about legal access to a medical procedure that allows families to determine their own futures. The freedom to decide if and when to have a child is fundamentally to ensuring women are equal and have full participation in society. As been stated before by my colleagues, yes, We keep hearing that Florida is the freedom state, but I continue to ask and push out freedom for who? Because the legislation that is being pushed out seems that it's only freedom for a select few. I truly believe all Floridians, women included, deserve the freedom to be healthy, prosperous, and safe. And this legislation does not do that. We must stand together and fight against this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative Robinson. I could not agree more. A fierce advocate is up next for her constituents and particularly for women. That's Representative Christine Hunchofsky.
Thank you, Congresswoman, and thank you for bringing us all together to have this important discussion. I'm 52 years old, and I never thought in this day and age that this would be a discussion we'd be having. I remember growing up hearing the stories pre-Roe versus Wade, the awful stories of things women had to go through. I remember seeing and living what women had to go through to have more of a voice in the workplace, in the workforce, and just in our communities. This, for me, is about women's freedoms and women's rights to choose. It's about women's rights. It's about human rights. The fact that we as women are being put in this position where we are not having control over our bodies, where we are not having control over who is brought into a decision-making process with us, where the government is getting involved in our personal family decisions between us and whomever we choose to bring into that conversation and that decision. I hope that all women are listening, because this is about women's freedoms, it's about women's rights, and it's about women having the ability to choose what happens to them and their bodies. And I hope all women and the men who love us are listening and standing up, because we are on a very dangerous path where we talk about freedom on one hand, and yet we decide who has a right to those freedoms and those choices. Thank you very much for having this discussion with us today.
Thank you so much. It was so well said. A woman who is in the fight for reproductive rights every single day is Laura Goodhue, the Florida Alliance Executive Director of Planned Parenthood Affiliates. Laura, thank you for joining us and for the work that you do every single day.
Thank you so much. And so many wonderful things have already been said. I use she and her pronouns, and really happy to head up the advocacy efforts of Planned Parenthood in Florida. This is also my 9th year fighting abortion bans in the Florida legislature. And I know many of us on this call can just, list the number of years that we've been doing this. However, this year, the threat is more real than it has ever been before. And I truly believe that. I believe our rights to safe and legal abortion are on the line more than they ever have been. With the US Supreme Court releasing an opinion on the constitutionality of a 15-week abortion ban from Mississippi later this year, and the state of Texas all but having banned abortion for the past 4 months, our right to bodily autonomy may soon be a thing of the past. We are facing not just a 15-week ban, but also a 16-week ban in Florida. In fact, it's a copycat of the Texas law. In our Planned Parenthood health centers, in particular in Tallahassee and in Jacksonville, we have been seeing people from other states for the past year because of the restrictions in those states. And we're now seeing people from Texas. So your rights may just depend upon your zip code after Florida is, well, I think they do now, but in particular after Florida is done this year. But we're not going to stand down without a fight. So let's be clear. These are abortion bans, despite the ludicrous claims of the bill sponsors of these bans to the contrary. In fact, they are saying that they are not bans because you can have an abortion after 15 weeks, after 6 weeks. But the reality is that they would not allow pregnant people to access the care that they have a right to and that their doctors deem appropriate. Which means if you live in Florida and you become pregnant, you could potentially lose the right to make your own decisions about that pregnancy, about your own future in just a matter of weeks. Now, many people in Florida and across this country, in fact, most people do obtain abortions in the first trimester. However, many people cannot. An anatomy scan is usually not performed until 20 weeks. And now many people, are super looking forward to this and have these gender reveal parties, and it's all about finding out the gender of their pregnancy. The real purpose of a 20-week anatomy scan is to find out if there are medical issues that need to be addressed. And then again, some people may not be able to access care in a timely manner, such as young people who have to get an appointment with a doctor. They might not be able to tell their parents. They might have to get a judicial waiver because of other laws that our legislature has passed. Transportation becomes an issue. Then again, you have survivors of rape. And as Senator Book noted, there is no exception for survivors of incest and rape, who may be too traumatized to even find out if they were pregnant, not suspecting that they might be pregnant, and to access care again before 15 weeks. And then again, we have Latinx, Black people, LGBTQIA people who are just systemically left out of the healthcare system because of racism, because of barriers, and they may not be able to access care before this arbitrary time limit. But regardless of these reasons, it doesn't matter. We should all agree that politicians shouldn't be making these medical decisions. The bill sponsor in the House, Representative Erin Grahl, said in committee last week, she did not even consult doctors nor other agencies that are referred to in this 15-week ban when she drafted the bill. Now, we at Planned Parenthood are doing all we can to fight back against this harmful legislation. And I know everyone on this call is also fighting with us. And a great action that people can take today, because we are in the middle of this fight, is to call your state senator and your representative and let them know that we don't support abortion bans in Florida. If they're a champion, like the representatives and senator on this call, please thank them, but please let the others know that this is the wrong priority for Floridians. So thank you again, Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz, for being such a champion, for supporting the Women's Health Protection Act, and to everyone else on this call. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you for the work that you do every single day on behalf of women's health, which is really what this entire argument is all about. Next, I'd like to ask Sheila Katz, the CEO of the National Council of Jewish Women, to speak. Sheila is on the front lines of this debate and so many other critical debates on behalf of women every single day. And I think actually Sheila is the president of the NCJW, not CEO, but she's the tops, bottom line. Sheila.
Thank you, Representative Wasserman Schultz. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sheila Katz, and on behalf of the 200,000 National Council of Jewish Women Advocates across the country, including over 17,000 in Florida through NCJW sections in Kendall, Miami Beach, Palm Beach, Sarasota, Manatee, Southeast Atlantic, and Valencia Shores, I'm here to say loudly and proudly that Jews support abortion access. This coming weekend, we will observe Repro Shabbat in Florida and alongside 700 communities across the country, since the Torah portion that will be read in synagogues all over the world this Shabbat shares the foundation for Judaism's interpretation on reproductive health rights and justice. Restrictive abortion laws, like the dangerous 15-week ban currently making its way through the Florida state legislature, are rooted in just one religion's understanding of when life begins. These laws limit the ability of Jews to fully practice our religious tradition. In Judaism, abortion is not only permitted, but in some cases required when the life of the pregnant person is at stake. We should all be able to make our own healthcare decisions in alignment with our own beliefs. Abortion is a racial justice issue. Abortion is an economic justice issue. Abortion is a healthcare issue. Abortion is a religious freedom issue. And abortion is an issue of compassion and dignity. Jewish scripture mandates kavod habriot, respecting human dignity and valuing the inherent worth of every individual. Denying access to abortion for those who need it and forcing people to be pregnant, particularly those who cannot afford to travel long distances to seek abortion elsewhere, denies the worth, value, and dignity of the person carrying the pregnancy. This is not holy. This is not just. The majority of people of faith support access to abortion and see abortion as essential health care. And for too long, we've allowed a small but loud group from the religious right to dominate the narrative. But it just isn't true. We should all have the right to access reproductive health care in line with our own faith and moral beliefs. Religious freedom in this country is meant to be a shield to protect people of minority faith communities, not a sword to discriminate against us. And as a reminder, we are commanded to love thy neighbor, not sue thy neighbor. It's easy to feel hopeless as Florida's senators and Florida state lawmakers seeking to restrict abortion access ignore the majority of their constituents, and as the Supreme Court signals its intent to dismantle the protections of Roe v. Wade, but this fight is not lost. May we remember that we are the majority. We must be loud and persistent to protect the right of every person in Florida and in this country, regardless of faith, income, race, gender, or geography, so we can all make our own moral and faith-informed decisions about our bodies, health, and future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sheila. You are the CEO. The president would probably want me to get that right. Thank you very much. And last but certainly not least, perhaps our most important speaker, Bailey Johnson, who is a young woman who will share her personal story with us. Bailey, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Thank you for having me. Hi, everyone. My name is Bailey. I'm 31 years old. I'm married to my wonderful husband, Christopher. And in February of 2020, we had to have a medical abortion. From PTSD to bipolar disorder, there is a strong history of mental illness that runs in my family, as well as suicide attempts. My grandmother, mother, and sister have all attempted in their lives. And in February of 2020, I found myself battling those same thoughts. A doctor diagnosed me with a mood disorder and recommended I start medication. 2 weeks later, we found out we were pregnant. Upon finding out my medication was not approved for safe use during pregnancy, and in our prayer and discernment with our God, faith, and doctors, we decided an abortion was the best option for all of us. Due to current Florida barriers to access, like limited clinic locations and mandated counseling that we did not need, we finally received our abortion approximately 1 day past the 6-week mark. In Texas, I would not be able to make that same decision today. The topic of the mental health of pregnant women continues to be missing from the reproductive conversation today, and is one of the reasons access to safe and legal abortions cannot be more important for the many women like me who knew in her soul I did not possess the physical or mental stamina required to be pregnant at that time, despite my desire to. Abortion decisions are nuanced, personal, and are not something any stranger in Tallahassee should have the right to decide for me or millions of other women in Florida. Abortion bans act as a counter witness to America's religious freedom, which I believe as a Christian mandates I support the narrative of liberation for women, not control. As stated in Reverend Katie Zay's new book, who is an ordained Baptist minister and CEO of an organization I now hold dear, the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice. She says, choosing to witness real-life abortion stories without judgment or prejudice is a radical act of grace. In the space between the telling and the hearing, the Spirit is at work. God speaks when we sit still and listen. Thank you for listening to me today.
Thank you so much, Bailey. I know that's a difficult story to share, and we appreciate it very much, making this personal and showing the impact of what these horrendous restrictive laws will do to women's reproductive health choices and their overall health in general is so important. And I'm thankful that we've been joined by my colleague and dear friend of many, many years, Representative Lois Frankel, and she certainly is a veteran of the fight for women's reproductive choices. Lois?
Yeah, thank you, Debbie. Thank you for bringing us together. I see Sheila and Charlie, good to see you, and these great advocates for access to healthcare, all of you. And thank you, Bailey, for that story that you just told us. Well, you know, I am a mother and I am a grandmother, and I know the incredible joys and also the responsibilities of raising a child. In fact, I just finished my weekend duty with my 3-year-old grandson. Look, I think I'm just going to sum up what I think we're all thinking here today on this call, and that is, you know, whether or not to bring a child into this world is a very personal decision. It should be made by a person with someone that they trust. It shouldn't be made by a state representative or a congressperson or a governor. access to reproductive health and reproductive freedom is being able to take care of your own health. Because as I think Bailey said, we don't know who's in other people's shoes and what they're facing. So thank you all for being here today. We thought Roe v. Wade was a done deal. Obviously, we've learned over the years, with hundreds and hundreds of restrictions, we're still in a battle. And thank you all that are fighting this good fight. I yield back.
Thank you so much, Lois. Mike, I think we're ready to take any questions that folks may have.
Thank you, Congresswoman. If you have a question for any of our speakers, you can raise your hand or write it in the chat box, and I will read it out loud for you. We're looking for questions. Any members of the media have any questions for any of our speakers? Please raise your hand. We have one from Ann Gegas, who writes, and it's a two-part question. The most common threshold for abortion limits internationally is 12 weeks. Do you think those countries don't have true choice? And are you concerned that limiting it to 15 weeks is just the start of limiting that window to decide to have an abortion?
I'll start off briefly. I'm not sure the media outlet that this individual is from who's asked the question, nor am
Florida
I.
Politics.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that average, but in the United States of America, we have had the right to make our own reproductive choices under Roe v. Wade for over 50 years. And that is a precedent that the Supreme Court needs to continue to uphold. It is one that right-wing extremists have relentlessly tried to chip away at until they can essentially eliminate it. And what I think is critical here is the hypocrisy, because you have a governor in this state, and I think that every single one of us, you see the head nods, the hypocrisy here is stunning. We have just been through, and we are continuing to go through, a fight over keeping people healthy and safe, which is what part of fighting for reproductive choice is about. And you have Republicans in this state and across the country who talk about the need for bodily autonomy, and that the law and rules and regulations shouldn't be telling people what to do with their bodies when they reference vaccinations and when they reference wearing masks, and the imposition that those restrictions and those requirements impose on people's right to do what they want with their own bodies. And then they have the audacity and the hypocrisy to do everything in their power to try to do exactly what they criticize and object to when it comes to vaccinations and the COVID-19 pandemic. It's just stunning. You're either for bodily autonomy and you're consistent on that, or you're not, but they're not consistent. They want to control women's bodies. It is an autocratic, ancient, age-old tradition of mostly men who simply want to be able to take women's rights away and treat us as if we are not human beings that can make our own decisions. It's unacceptable, and it needs to stop, and we are going to fight it to our last breath. And anyone else can hop on that question too, please.
I just wanted to point out that sometimes you don't find out a fetal abnormality to much later in your pregnancy. As a matter of fact, it's usually after the 18-week mark that you start going through all of the comprehensive tests, the ultrasounds, and the bill allows for an abortion with the incompatibility of life. But sometimes fetal abnormalities are a quality of life issue, and what the quality of life will be. And so by the further you push back that decision-making process, whether it's 12 weeks or 15 weeks, you're going to have families finding out information after 15 weeks, and you're limiting their ability to make those important decisions for their family and for their bodies. And so for me, 15 weeks is incredibly arbitrary. There is already a law in the United States, and we need to stick to that law and give women as much time as they need as under the federal law to make this decision, which is incredibly painful. My pregnancy was a wanted pregnancy. This isn't, like they like to paint a picture about abortions. I went through infertility to have that pregnancy. So any number less than what's already allowed by federal law is arbitrary and restricts a woman's ability to make those important decisions for their family.
Yeah, and Debbie, just to follow up with the reporter's question, yes, this is the path to eliminate abortion throughout the country, because if in fact the Supreme Court throws the decision back to the states and does not recognize anymore a federal right to privacy and a right to access to legal abortion, there are already 12 states that have laws on the book that eliminate abortion. And I ask everyone to just think about this. For a woman who lives in Florida, who has a circumstance where medically they must get an abortion, and this state has obstacles or eventually eliminates, where does that woman go? Does she go to Alabama? Does she drive to Georgia? Does she get on a plane and she has to try to find a state that will be receptive to her medical needs? And who does that impact the most? It impacts the most the people who have the least to be able to access medical treatment.
By the way, let me just underscore once again, what we need to do is pass the Women's Health Protection Act. That is the most critical thing that we can do to achieve under federal law, which would cover everyone in the country, that women have the right to make their own reproductive choices. And then what happens with Roe won't make as much difference. But in the absence of that, we need to make sure that Roe v. Wade remains the Supreme Court precedent that is the law of the land. Representative Robinson?
Yes, I just kind of wanted to address, it says something about the international, limits is basically 12 weeks. Well, I just wanted to note that in Canada, abortion is legal throughout. And as we know, they're very big on healthcare for all people. And so there are other countries that are supporting and actually recognize the importance of women's health. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation.
Thank you so much. Mike, are there any other questions?
Sorry,
to the Florida politics reporter, you can reach out to Representative Bartleman on those questions separately.
Once again, if you have a question, you can raise your hand or write it in the chat box, and we'd be more than happy to read it for you. Seeing as there are no more questions, Congresswoman, do you want to do a quick wrap up?
No, I mean, I think everything's been said, and we've made our point. Representative Bartleman, did you want to address the overall question?
Yeah. Oh, yes. So we found out that the fetus was abnormal through an ultrasound, and we just went weeks upon weeks of trying to figure out what to do. And it was incredibly difficult because I was a special education teacher. I knew the challenges, I knew the issues, and we were almost at the limit and the time frame, and the pregnancy terminated on its own. And it's hard to talk about, and I know you asked the question, but the important thing that I want you to take away from this is that I had the ability to make that decision. I had the ability to weigh the pros and cons, the impact on my family, the impact on my older daughter, Emma. And I was able to deliberate again with just my husband, my doctor, and my God, not the Florida legislature. And this bill is going to take away a woman's right to make those choices. And that's why it's really important with the arbitrary 15 weeks. We should not be restricting it at all. At any point in the pregnancy, you can find out something is seriously, seriously wrong. And you, a woman and a family, they deserve the right and the freedom to make that decision at that point in time. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. I think that's a personal place and an important place to end. Thank you for joining us, everybody, and to our legislative colleagues, good luck as the session progresses. Let us know how we can help. Bye, everyone.